The congressional hearing room fell silent as Congressman Byron Donald stood up, his navy suit crisp under the bright C-SPAN cameras. He pointed his finger across the aisle at Representative Jasmine Crockett, his voice rising with confidence. "Let me educate you on how the real world works," he began, a slight smirk playing on his lips. But what happened in the next 60 seconds would become the most viral political moment of the year. Jasmine Crockett, sitting calmly in her burgundy blazer, simply smiled. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't interrupt. She waited. And when Byron finally paused to take a breath, expecting her to crumble under his lecture, she leaned forward into her microphone and said just one sentence, a sentence so devastating, so perfectly crafted, that Byron's face went from confident to completely frozen. The room erupted, social media exploded, and Byron Donalds learned a lesson he would never forget. Never try to lecture Jasmine Crockett. Before we dive into exactly what she said and how this whole confrontation unfolded, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. You won't want to miss how this plays out. This wasn't just another congressional hearing. This was the moment when a young black woman from Texas showed the entire nation that intelligence, preparation, and the perfect comeback can defeat arrogance every single time. And Byron Donalds? He walked into a trap he didn't even see coming. To understand why this moment hit so hard, you need to know who these two people are and why this confrontation mattered so much. Byron Donalds is a Republican congressman from Florida's 19th district. At 44 years old, he's one of the few black Republicans in Congress, and he's made a name for himself as a vocal supporter of conservative policies and a fierce defender of Donald Trump. He's smooth, well-spoken, and known for his confident debating style. Byron came from humble beginnings. He's talked openly about his mother raising him in Brooklyn, New York, and how he worked his way up in the financial sector before entering politics. But here's the thing about Byron: he's also known for being condescending, especially toward his Democratic colleagues. He has this way of speaking to people, particularly women and people of color, on the other side of the aisle, like he's the smartest person in the room, and everyone else just needs to be educated. He uses phrases like, "Let me explain this to you," and "if you understood economics a lot." And today he was about to use that approach on the wrong person. Jasmine Crockett is a 42-year-old Democratic representative from Texas's 30th district, representing parts of Dallas. But calling her just a congresswoman doesn't do her justice. Before entering Congress in 2023, Jasmine was a civil rights attorney who fought cases involving police brutality, voting rights, and criminal justice reform. She graduated from Howard University and then got her law degree from the University of Houston Law Center. She's been in courtrooms facing down prosecutors, judges, and defense attorneys who tried to intimidate her. She's sharp, quick-thinking, and absolutely fearless. Jasmine also has something that makes her incredibly effective: she doesn't lose her cool. While others yell and bang tables, she stays calm, collected, and deadly accurate with her words. Her colleagues have learned that when Jasmine gets that slight smile on her face, someone is about to get destroyed politely but thoroughly. The setting for today's confrontation was a House Oversight Committee hearing on economic policy and federal spending. The Republicans, led by Chairman James Comer, had called the hearing to criticize Democratic spending programs, claiming they were wasteful and hurting everyday Americans. Byron Donalds had been given time to question witnesses and make his points, but Jasmine Crockett was also on that committee, and she'd come prepared. The tension in the room was already high. For weeks, Republicans had been attacking Democratic policies on immigration, crime, and the economy. They'd been especially harsh on black Democratic women in Congress, calling them woke, radical, and out of touch. Jasmine had watched Byron in previous hearings, and she'd noticed his pattern. He loved to lecture, to talk down, to act like he had all the answers. Today, she was ready for him. The stakes were bigger than just this one hearing. Millions of Americans were watching on C-SPAN, YouTube, and social media. This was about respect, about representation, and about whether Byron Donalds could continue getting away with his condescending style. For black women in politics, moments like these mattered. They were tired of being talked down to, tired of having their intelligence questioned, tired of men like Byron acting superior. Jasmine wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every black woman who'd been dismissed, every person who'd been told they didn't understand something when they understood it perfectly. This was her moment to flip the script. And Byron? He had no idea what was coming. The hearing had been going on for about 90 minutes when Byron Donalds' turn came to speak. He'd been sitting there, watching the Democratic members ask questions, and you could see he was getting more and more ready to jump in. He had his papers organized, his talking points ready, and that look on his face that said he was about to drop some knowledge. Chairman Comer nodded to him. The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 5 minutes. Byron stood up, buttoning his suit jacket in that way politicians do when they want to look authoritative. He cleared his throat and started strong. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I've been sitting here listening to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and I have to say, I'm deeply concerned about the lack of understanding about basic economics and how federal spending actually works. He paused, letting that sink in. A few Republicans nodded. The Democrats shifted in their seats, already sensing what was coming. We've heard a lot of talk about investing in communities, about spending more money on social programs, about how we need to expand government to help people. But here's what nobody on that side wants to acknowledge. He pointed toward the Democratic side. Every dollar the government spends is a dollar taken from hard-working American taxpayers. Jasmine sat, quietly, her hands folded on the table in front of her. She was taking notes, her face neutral. But if you looked closely, you could see that slight smile starting to form. Byron continued, getting more animated. And I think some of my colleagues need a lesson in fiscal responsibility. See, when I was working in the financial sector, I learned something very important. You can't spend money you don't have. It's simple math, but apparently that's too complicated for some people to understand. A few gasps came from the Democratic side. That was a direct shot, and everyone knew it. Byron was basically calling his colleagues stupid, but he wasn't done. Let me break this down in simple terms, he said, his voice dripping with condescension now. When the government spends more than it takes in, that creates debt. Debt has to be paid back. That debt gets passed on to our children and grandchildren. This isn't rocket science, folks. This is basic household budget stuff. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez leaned over to Jasmine and whispered something. Jasmine nodded slightly but didn't react otherwise. She just kept writing notes. Byron was on a roll now, thinking he was winning. And you know what really bothers me? We have members of Congress, educated people who should know better, who sit up here and advocate for policies that would bankrupt this nation. They talk about free this and free that, without ever explaining who's going to pay for it. He turned slightly, and now he was looking more directly at the Democratic side of the room, and particularly toward where Jasmine was sitting. I think some members need to go back and take Economics 101. Maybe audit a community college course or something, because clearly, the education they got before coming here didn't cover basic fiscal responsibility. That did it. The room started buzzing. Democrats were shaking their heads, whispering to each other. Republicans were trying not to smile too obviously. Byron had just insulted the intelligence of everyone on the other side of the aisle. Chairman Comer banged his gavel. Order, please. The gentleman from Florida still has time remaining. Byron adjusted his tie, clearly pleased with himself. Now, I know I might be making some people uncomfortable with these facts, but facts don't care about your feelings, as someone once said. The reality is that Democratic policies have failed everywhere they've been tried. Look at the city's point of order, mister. Chairman, Jasmine's voice cut through clearly, calmly. Byron stopped mid-sentence, looking annoyed at being interrupted. Chairman Comer looked at Jasmine. The gentlewoman from Texas? Yes, Mr. Chairman. I just want to clarify, is the gentleman from Florida yielding his time for questions, or is this just going to be a monologue where he talks at us instead of with us? Some chuckles rippled through the room. Byron's jaw tightened. Mr. Chairman, I'm using my time as I see fit to educate. There's that word again, Jasmine said, still completely calm. Educate. Interesting word choice. Byron's face flushed slightly. I'm simply trying to explain basic economic principles that seem to be lost on... Lost on whom, exactly? Jasmine interrupted, her voice still even. Please, be specific. Who are you trying to educate? The tension in the room skyrocketed. Everyone knew what was happening. Byron had been making broad statements, but Jasmine was forcing him to either back down or double down. If he said he was trying to educate her specifically, he'd be directly insulting a colleague. If he backed down, he'd look weak. Byron made his choice. He doubled down. I'm trying to educate anyone who thinks we can just print money and spend our way to prosperity. Anyone who thinks government is the solution to every problem. Anyone who hasn't learned the lessons of basic economics. He paused, then added with that smirk. If the gentlewoman from Texas feels like I'm speaking to her specifically, perhaps that's because she recognizes herself in that description. The room went silent. That was a direct attack. Byron had basically called Jasmine economically illiterate on national television. Chairman Comer shifted uncomfortably. "The gentleman's time has expired, Mr. Chairman." Jasmine said, her voice cutting through clearly. "I'd like to respond. I'll use my questioning time." Comer nodded slowly. "The gentlewoman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes." This was it. This was the moment everyone had been building toward. Jasmine stood up slowly, deliberately. She wasn't rushed. She wasn't flustered. She gathered her papers, took a sip of water, and then looked directly at Byron Donald's. The slight smile was still there, but now her eyes were sharp, focused. Byron sat down, arms crossed, that smirk still on his face. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd put her in her place, and now she'd fumble through some defensive response. He was so wrong. Jasmine adjusted her microphone and looked directly at Byron. When she spoke, her voice was clear, calm, and carried the weight of someone who had been underestimated her entire life and was done with it. "Congressman Donalds, I appreciate your attempt to provide us all with an education today. Really, I do. It's always entertaining when someone assumes they're the smartest person in the room." She paused, letting that hang in the air. "But since you brought up economics and fiscal responsibility, I'd like to ask you about your voting record." Byron uncrossed his arms slightly, sensing something was coming but not sure what. Jasmine continued, pulling out a document. "You voted for the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in committee markup sessions, correct? The one that added nearly $2 trillion to the deficit over 10 years? Byron started to respond. "That's different because—" "I'm not done," Jasmine said, her voice still calm but firm. "You also voted to increase military spending by $80 billion beyond what the Pentagon even asked for. You voted against closing tax loopholes that allow billionaires to pay lower rates than teachers. And just last month, you voted for a bill that would add another $500, $2 billion to the deficit to fund additional tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans." She looked up from her papers directly at him. "So please, Congressman, educate me. How is it fiscally responsible to blow up the deficit for tax cuts for the rich, but irresponsible to invest in healthcare, education, and infrastructure for working families?" The room was completely silent. Every eye was on Byron. He opened his mouth to respond, but Jasmine wasn't finished. "And since you brought up community college, which, by the way, is an interesting suggestion given that I have a law degree and you have a finance degree, so we're both educated professionals here, let me remind you of something they definitely teach in Economics 101, return on investment." She pulled out another document. "Studies from MIT, Harvard, Stanford, those community colleges have shown that every dollar invested in early childhood education returns $7 to the economy. Every dollar invested in infrastructure returns $2 to $3 in economic growth. But tax cuts for the wealthy? The CBO says they return about 30 cents on the dollar." Byron tried to jump in. "Those studies are peer-reviewed and published in leading economic journals," Jasmine finished for him. "Unlike, say, your talking points, which I'm pretty sure came from a think tank funded by the same billionaires who benefit from the policies you support." Some Democrats couldn't help but laugh. Republicans sat stone-faced, and Byron's face was getting redder. But Jasmine still wasn't done building to her final blow. She was methodical, stacking evidence like she was in a courtroom, which made sense. She'd done this thousands of times as an attorney. "Let's talk about those cities you were about to mention, Congressman. The ones you claim Democratic policies have failed? I represent Dallas. Our unemployment rate is below the national average. Our economy is growing. We're attracting businesses from red states because we invest in education and infrastructure." She pulled up another sheet. "Meanwhile, if we're comparing states, 9 of the 10 states most dependent on federal aid are red states. 9 of the 10 states with the highest poverty rates are red states. 9 of the 10 states with the worst healthcare outcomes are red states. So please, tell me again about policy failures." The Democratic side of the room was completely energized now. You could feel the momentum shifting. Byron was shaking his head, trying to maintain his composure, but the smirk was gone. "Mr. Chairman," Byron tried to interject. "This is just typical. I still have 3 minutes, Jasmine said calmly. "You used your full 5 minutes to lecture us. I'm going to use mine to respond with facts." Chairman Comer had no choice but to nod. "The gentlewoman controls the time." Jasmine turned back to Byron. "You mentioned hardworking American taxpayers. Let's talk about them. You know who pays the highest effective tax rate in this country? Working families making between $50,000 and $75,000 a year. You know who pays among the lowest? Billionaires. The ProPublica investigation showed that the wealthiest 25 Americans paid an average tax rate of 3.4%. She let that number sit. 3.4%, Congressman. I paid more than that. You paid more than that. But you want to lecture me about fiscal responsibility while defending a system where a teacher pays a higher rate than a billionaire? Byron tried again. The tax code is complex. It's only complex because people like you vote to keep it that way, Jasmine shot back, her voice rising slightly for the first time. Every time we try to simplify it, every time we try to close loopholes, you vote no. You vote to protect the complexity that benefits your wealthy donors. She looked down at her notes, and then came the moment the buildup was complete, and now she was ready to deliver the knockout blow. But you know what, Congressman Donald? After listening to you for the last several minutes talk about education and economics and fiscal responsibility, after hearing you suggest that I need to go back to school, after your condescending tone and your assumption that you understand these issues better than anyone else in this room, I realized something. She paused. The entire room leaned forward. You could have heard a pin drop. You didn't come here today to have a real conversation about economic policy. You came here to perform, to show off. To talk down to your colleagues, particularly the women, particularly the black women, because that plays well with your base. Byron started to stand up. That's completely, and then Jasmine delivered the line. The one sentence that would end his argument, go viral, and become part of congressional history. She leaned into her microphone, looked Byron Donalds directly in the eyes, and with perfect calm said, "The difference between you and me, Congressman, is that I don't need to tell people I'm smart, I just show them." The room exploded. Democrats leapt to their feet, applauding. Staff members in the back gasped and whispered frantically. Republicans sat frozen, unsure how to react. Chairman Comer banged his gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order, but the damage was done. Byron's face went from red to pale. His mouth opened like he was going to say something, but nothing came out. He'd been completely dismantled in front of millions of viewers. Every argument he'd made had been systematically destroyed, and then she'd finished with a line so perfect, so devastating, that there was no comeback possible. Jasmine calmly gathered her papers and sat down, that slight smile still on her face. She'd done exactly what she set out to do. The camera zoomed in on Byron's face. You could see the moment he realized he'd lost. Not just the argument he'd lost, the entire confrontation. He'd walked in confident and condescending, and he was leaving humiliated. "Order!" Chairman Comer shouted. "We will have order!" But the moment was already over. Jasmine had won, and everyone in that room knew it. The hearing continued, but nobody was paying attention anymore. Staffers were already on their phones. Social media was about to explode. Byron sat there for the rest of the hearing, quiet and subdued. He didn't try to interject again. He didn't ask any more questions. The man who had started the day trying to lecture everyone had been thoroughly educated himself. And Jasmine? She sat calmly taking notes, occasionally conferring with her colleagues, completely composed. She'd just delivered one of the most devastating takedowns in recent congressional history, and she looked like it was just another Tuesday. The moment the hearing ended, the explosion began. Within 30 seconds of Jasmine Crockett sitting down after her response, phones throughout the congressional press gallery lit up like Christmas trees. Reporters were frantically typing. C-SPAN's live stream viewer count was skyrocketing as people who'd missed it live started tuning in to the replay. And on social media, particularly X, formerly Twitter, the moment was already going nuclear. A Democratic staffer, who'd been in the hearing room, posted a 45-second clip with the caption, "Jasmine Crockett just ended Byron Donalds' whole career with one sentence." The tweet included just the final exchange: Byron's smirk, Jasmine's calm delivery of, "I don't need to tell people I'm smart, I just show them," and his face going pale. Within 5 minutes, the tweet had 50,000 views. Within an hour it had passed 1 million. But that was just the beginning. The hashtag number Jasmine Crockett started trending immediately. Then number one sentence. Then number show don't tell. By the evening news cycle, all three were in the top 10 trending topics in the United States. Political journalists from every major outlet rushed to post the clip. Watch, Repinet, Jasmine Crockett delivers devastating response to Byron Donalds, wrote The Hill. CNN's headline read, Texas Democrat shuts down Florida Republican's lecture with one line. MSNBC went with, freshman congresswoman delivers masterclass in responding to condescension. Even conservative outlets couldn't completely ignore it. Fox News buried the story but ran a piece titled, "Heated Exchange in House Oversight Committee," carefully editing the clip to make Byron look less bad. But their own comment section wasn't buying it. Viewers who'd watched the full exchange were calling them out for the selective editing. On X, the reactions came in waves. The first wave was pure celebration from Democrats and progressives. "That's my congresswoman," wrote one Dallas voter. "Byron Donalds really thought he could lecture a civil rights attorney and get away with it," posted another. A popular progressive account tweeted, "Jasmine Crockett is everything. Educated, prepared, unshakable. That's how you handle bullies." The memes started almost immediately. Someone created a side-by-side image. Byron's smug face in the first panel with, "Let me educate you," and his pale, shocked face in the second panel with, "I've made a huge mistake." It got 800,000 likes. Another popular meme showed Jasmine with laser eyes and the caption, "I don't need to tell people I'm smart, I just show them," with Byron, photoshopped as dust blowing away. Even people who didn't follow politics closely were sharing it. But the second wave of reaction was even more significant. It came from black women across America. "This is what we deal with every day," wrote one lawyer. "Men like Byron who assume they're smarter than us, who talk down to us, who think because we're black women we don't know what we're talking about. And Jasmine just showed the whole country how we handle it." Another black woman posted, "I started crying watching this. Not because I'm sad, because I'm so proud." Jasmine didn't yell, didn't get emotional, didn't give them any excuse to call her angry. She just methodically destroyed him with facts, and that perfect final line. A thread from a history professor went viral. What Jasmine Crockett did today is part of a long tradition of black sendas. Women having to be twice as good, twice as prepared, twice as calm to get half the respect. Shirley Chisholm did it, Barbara Jordan did it, Kamala Harris does it. And Jasmine just added her name to that list. The Congressional Black Caucus issued a statement praising Jasmine's dignified and fact-based response to condescension and disrespect. Several CBC members posted their own reactions. Representative Ayanna Pressley tweeted, "This is what happens when you come for at Jasmine for US. She's brilliant, she's prepared, and she doesn't play." Byron Donalds learned that today. Even some people who disagreed with Jasmine politically had to admit she'd won the exchange. "I don't agree with her politics," wrote one self-described conservative. "But she absolutely destroyed Byron here. He shouldn't have gone after her like that. She was way too prepared." But of course, Byron's strongest supporters tried to defend him. Some claimed the exchange was taken out of context. "If you watch the full hearing, Byron made good points," argued one pro-Trump account. But anyone who actually watched the full hearing could see that wasn't true. Jasmine had systematically addressed every single point he'd made. Others tried to attack Jasmine personally. "She's just another woke Democrat," posted some right-wing accounts. But those attacks fell flat because the video showed exactly what happened. This wasn't about ideology, it was about respect, preparation, and one person completely outclassing another. A few tried to claim Byron wasn't really trying to lecture her, that Democrats were being too sensitive. But Byron's own words, "Let me educate you." Some people need to go back to Economics 101 were right there on video for everyone to see. By evening, Byron Donalds himself tried to do damage control. He posted on X. "Had a vigorous policy debate today with at Jasmine for US. That's what Congress is, for robust discussion. We disagree on economics, but I respect her passion." The replies were brutal. "That's not what it looked like when your face went white," someone wrote. "You weren't having a debate, you were trying to lecture her and got schooled," posted another. "The footage shows you being condescending. Don't try to rewrite what we all saw." Even Byron's attempt to reframe it as a normal policy disagreement backfired. "If this was just a normal debate, why did you tell her to go take a community college class?" asked one reply with thousands of likes. The mainstream media coverage kept building throughout the evening. Joy Reid on MSNBC dedicated a segment to it, bringing on former Congresswoman Donna Edwards and political analyst Angela Rye to discuss the moment. "What we saw today," Reid said, "was a black woman refusing to be diminished. Byron Donalds thought he could talk down to Jasmine Crockett the way men like him have been doing to women like her for generations. And she showed him and showed the country that those days are over." Angela Rye added, "And can we talk about the fact that she stayed completely calm? She didn't raise her voice, she didn't get emotional. She just laid out fact after fact after fact, and then delivered that perfect closing line. That's mastery." CNN's Jake Tapper also covered it, showing the full exchange and noting, Regardless of your political views, this was a remarkable moment of someone being prepared, staying composed under attack, and delivering an effective rebuttal. Even Stephen Colbert covered it on The Late Show, playing the clip and joking. Byron Donalds tried to mansplain economics to a civil rights lawyer who graduated from Howard University. That's like trying to teach Michael Jordan how to play basketball. How did he think that was going to end? The audience laughed and applauded, and Colbert added, and that final line, "I don't need to tell people I'm smart, I just show them that's going on, coffee mugs, t-shirts, everything." That's an all-time mic drop. He was right. By the next morning, merchandise was already appearing. Coffee mugs with Jasmine's quote, t-shirts with her photo, and the line. Someone even created a parody poster styled like a motivational poster with Jasmine's image and the quote. But the impact went beyond memes and merchandise. The confrontation sparked a broader conversation about respect in politics, about how women of color are treated in professional settings, and about what real strength looks like. Major newspapers ran op-eds. The Washington Post published a piece titled "The Jasmine Crockett Moment, When Preparation Meets Opportunity." The New York Times ran an analysis. How one sentence captured the frustration of professional women everywhere. A piece in The Atlantic examined the exchange through a historical lens, connecting it to other moments when black women in politics had to deal with condescension. Barbara Jordan's eloquence during Watergate, Shirley Chisholm running for president, Kamala Harris's "I'm" speaking moment, and now Jasmine Crockett's perfect takedown. Back in Dallas, Jasmine's district exploded with pride. Her office reported being flooded with calls and emails of support. Local news stations interviewed constituents who all said variations of the same thing. "That's our representative. We're so proud." A Dallas restaurant put up a sign, "Home of Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. She don't tell you. She's smart. She shows you." It became an instant landmark, with people stopping to take photos. Jasmine's campaign fundraising also saw an immediate boost. In the 24 hours after the exchange, she raised over $500,000 from small-dollar donors across the country. People who'd never heard of her before but were so impressed by what they saw that they wanted to support her. Meanwhile, Byron Donalds was having a very different 24 hours. His social media mentions were overwhelmingly negative. His attempt to reframe the exchange as a vigorous policy debate wasn't working. Videos of the confrontation kept being shared with captions like, "Watch Byron Donalds get destroyed," and "When trying to mansplain goes wrong." Conservative outlets that usually supported him were notably quiet. Some of his Republican colleagues privately suggested he should just let it blow over rather than keep responding. "You lost this one," one reportedly told him. "Just move on." There were reports that Byron's staff was frustrated, feeling he'd walked into an obvious trap. "We told him to be careful with Crockett," an unnamed staffer told Politico. "She's smart and she doesn't back down." But he thought he could handle her. For Jasmine, the moment cemented her status as a rising star in the Democratic Party. She'd only been in Congress since January 2023, but now she was a household name. Speaking invitations poured in. Other Congress members wanted to appear with her. And most importantly, she'd shown that you could stand up to bullies without becoming one yourself. In an interview with the Breakfast Club radio show a few days later, Jasmine reflected on the moment. "I wasn't trying to go viral. I was just trying to do my job and defend myself against someone who was being disrespectful." But if that moment resonated with people, especially black women who deal with this kind of thing every day, then I'm grateful for that. When asked about her preparation, she smiled. "That's my legal training. In court, you never ask a question you don't know the answer to, and you never make a claim you can't back up. I knew exactly what his voting record was. I knew the studies, I knew the facts. So when he tried to lecture me, I had everything ready." The host asked about the final line, whether she'd planned it. "That came in the moment," Jasmine admitted. "But it's something I've learned throughout my career. You don't have to brag about your credentials or wave your degrees around. Your work speaks for itself. And if someone underestimates you, that's on them. You just make sure you're prepared to prove them wrong." The exchange also had practical political implications. Byron Donalds found himself less effective in future hearings. When he tried to make similar arguments in subsequent committee meetings, Democrats would reference "last time you tried this," or "remember how that worked out for you." His credibility had taken a hit. Meanwhile, Jasmine's influence grew. She was appointed to additional subcommittees. Her amendments got more co-sponsors. Other members, even some Republicans, started treating her with more obvious respect. She'd proven she wasn't someone to trifle with. The confrontation also energized discussions about who would be future leaders of the Democratic Party. Jasmine's name started appearing in articles about the new generation of Democratic leaders, alongside AOC, Maxwell Frost, and others. At just 42, she had decades of political career ahead of her, and this moment had put her on the national map. For Black women in professional settings everywhere, the exchange became a teaching moment. Law schools started using the clip in classes about courtroom composure. Business schools discussed it in leadership courses. It became an example of how to handle disrespect professionally, stay calm, stick to facts, and deliver your point with precision. "I don't need to tell people I'm smart, I just show them," became something of a mantra. Women would quote it in job interviews when someone questioned their qualifications. Students would use it when professors underestimated them. It transcended politics and became a statement about competence, confidence, and refusing to be diminished. 3 weeks after the confrontation, Jasmine returned to the same committee for another hearing. When she arrived, several members, Democrats and Republicans, came over to greet her, some with knowing smiles. Byron Donald was also there, but he notably avoided eye contact and stayed on his side of the room. When it came time for questions, Jasmine was as prepared and professional as always. But there was a noticeable difference in how people treated her. No one interrupted her. No one talked down to her. No one tried to lecture her. She'd earned something that should have been automatic but often isn't for Black women in positions of power: respect. And Byron? He was more careful with his words, more measured in his tone. He'd learned his lesson: never try to lecture Jasmine Crockett. The story of that day became part of congressional lore, one of those moments that people would reference for years to come. Remember when Byron Donald tried to lecture Jasmine Crockett? Became shorthand for someone making a huge miscalculation. But more than that, it became an inspiration. It showed that you don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to be aggressive to be strong. You don't have to tell everyone how smart you are, you just have to show them. And Jasmine Crockett? She showed everyone exactly who she is. A brilliant attorney, a skilled legislator, a powerful voice for her constituents, and someone who will not be dismissed, diminished, or disrespected no matter who tries. The final word on the confrontation came from Jasmine herself in a tweet posted that evening. After all the chaos had settled, respect is earned, not demanded. Preparation beats arrogance every time. And to everyone who's ever been underestimated, keep showing them. The tweet got 2 million likes. If you enjoyed watching Byron Donald learn his lesson the hard way, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. We're covering all the latest political showdowns, congressional confrontations, and moments when someone who thought they were untouchable gets a reality check. Drop a comment below. Have you ever had a moment where someone tried to lecture you and you had to put them in their place? What's your favorite comeback line? And do you think Byron Donald will ever try this? Again, don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next video where we'll be diving into another epic political confrontation. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. This is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. This is what happens when someone tries to bully the wrong person. This is what happens when Jasmine Crockett shows up to work. Byron Donald tried to lecture her. She ended his argument with one sentence, and the whole world watched. See you in the next one.